I don't know where this screenshot's from. It may be me. It may be from some mod page. Uh, this has been my desktop background for like 15 years at this point. If you took this image or know where it's from, let me know. I just assumed it was a screenshot that I took that looked pretty good. I look at Morrowind every day. Every day. This is a PowerPoint presentation. We'll be joined by the lovely Marhouse as a co-presenter, more or less someone to talk at as I present this. He's also got some interesting tips from extensive work on TR one quest, which is fascinating. So we'll when people funnel in, we'll start. Marhouse, you want to enter the stage? Oh, I have to invite to speak? There we go. Okay.
What a lovely introduction, Mort. Yeah, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's really just been one quest. It really has just been one quest. Yeah.
Is the recording starting? Or I guess we'll wait for people to finish, and then I'll go into it.
All right, I see a go ahead in the chat. I'm also recording.
Go ahead. Yep. Okay. Excellent.
It's lovely.
So, welcome everyone to Advanced Questing by Mort, and there should be a little addendum and Marhouse because he's also here with me. Most of my work in my questing career has been with TR, but I've done a lot of solo stuff as well. This is a decently long PowerPoint, so I'm just going to go right into it. The first tip that I'm going to give to people is to don't reinvent the wheel. There is a lovely website hosted by Project Tamriel that has a bunch of scripting examples and has a bunch of templates for a lot of things that you might want to do. Things like enabling and disabling per quest stage. Most of these are pretty well optimized, and they include a lot of scripting tips that you wouldn't normally see unless you know how to script correctly. So looking at this example, one of the key parts of an optimized Morrowind script is going to be an early return. So you can see in this, it checks the journal index, checks if it's disabled, and then it's immediately going to return. So you're not just constantly disabling the same object over and over and over. You want to hit that early return, save that CPU clock cycle, and start from the beginning of the script. I suppose I should also say that this talk is also assuming that you know a little bit about Morrowind scripting. You know, at least a little more than the basics. You know that a script is going to run every frame from top to bottom until it hits a return or it hits the end of the script and start over again. Another cool optimization here is you can see the if get disabled doesn't have an equals 1, doesn't have an equals 0 in any of these. If is just going to check whether it's, I believe it's any positive value. It might be positive integer value. Someone will correct me on this if it works for negative values. I don't really. Yeah, it's non-zero value.
Yeah.
And yeah, pretty simple. If you were trying to make like an NPC that shows up for a certain part of the quest, you'll this is pretty much the best way that you can do it. And you can copy paste this into any number of things. You can include this little section as the top part of your script and have more advanced stuff further on. This is a fantastic resource that everyone should use.
I have a question.
Yes.
When would you want to use disabling and enabling, and when would you want to use position cell?
Excellent question. Generally, as far as, I mean, position cell is certainly gonna, well, they're both gonna store the variable information, regardless whether they're enabled or disabled, as long as you don't delete them.
Right. Like, it's sort of like a best practices kind of sense, right? Like, when do you want the NPC to just like magically appear in the world when they need to be there? And when do you want them to already be in the world, but not necessarily in that position, and then put them there? Like,
So if I remember correctly, I I agree with Detail Devil. I prefer enable disable. I don't play those fancy games of trying to keep the world consistent, because for the most part players aren't going to notice. Um, I think position cell, there's some weird stipulation with that, like position cell, they have to be, it's not that you have to see them first. That's a different stipulation. But
yeah, I think that stipulation. I know UESP says it, like you need to have them loaded in the game's memory before you can position cell them in. But that's, I think, essentially not true. Or at least I've been able to position cell a bunch of NPCs into a cell whom I've never seen before. Like, I can just set my starting cell to be some place, and then just position cell a bunch of people in,
yeah,
and then it all just works fine. So I don't really know what UESP is talking about. I think that was like some MSFD tip that was just like wrong that no one ever corrected. Not entirely sure.
there's a ton of like junk science with Morrowind scripting in general.
A lot of
My
bro
advice
science.
is, yeah, my advice is just try it. Just try it in game. Just see if it works. There's a lot of stuff that like online, like the USP page will be like, never do this. It'll never work. And then you do it and you're like, oh,
Works fine.
that works fine. Oh, I
Yeah.
guess position cell is, you can't position cell an NPC that isn't placed. I think I'm pretty sure that's accurate. So they
Oh
have
yeah,
to
I think
actually
that.
be in the world. They
Yeah,
can't
there
just
has to be like.
they have to have a reference.
Right, they have to exist somewhere, even if this isn't like some fake make believe cell that no one's ever going to access.
Yeah.
Like TR right now has a T underscore script holder cell. That's where I'm putting all the tournament NPCs before they actually, get placed in the world. Because some of them, or I guess I can get to that later. But yeah, basically they don't have to exist in a place where the player's seen them, just somewhere in the world. Ref count has to be greater than 0. I guess also less than 2, so exactly 1 for it to work
So
right.
this is another one, for disabling an NPC. Let's say you're out in the world, you see an NPC you want to talk to. They say, thanks for helping me out. Bye. And you don't necessarily want to just leave them static in the world forever. You want them to actually be disabled once you're out of sight. So kind of walking through this and why each of these steps make sense. You got to think, well, you don't want the NPC to instantly disable when the quest ends. They'll just zap out of existence. Sometimes you can have them like cast. You can use the cast function to make them cast a spell and magically disappear. I think that's janky as well. I think unless they're explicitly a mage, that feels bad. Ravane suggests using fade out, fade in with a disable in there. I'm not gonna comment on that. The way that this script does it is pretty nice. Just kind of walking down this list, you can see if they're not disabled, return. It mentions use of set delete. Set delete is if you really want to like eliminate the NPC from existence and you never want to talk to them again. Set delete's okay. Else if cell change, and cell change is going to trigger every time not only you enter an interior to an exterior or vice versa, it's going to trigger when you move across a cell border. So with this, this is the reason for that get distance, because if they're right on the edge of the cell and they like you just walk over that cell, even if they're 5 feet away from you, if they're in a different cell and you don't have this get distance, they'll still zap out of existence. So you got to make sure you have that cell changed and the get distance to the player in there. Otherwise, it's more or less the same kind of structure as the previous script. Just another interesting things to think about. Again, this is another script with an example on the wiki. I believe it has some interesting like timer script added as well. I kind of took that out and simplified it a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't really get that one. I mean, I get this one.
Another. This is maybe one of the most deceptively simple scripts that has a lot of advanced concepts you wouldn't normally think about. This is the infamous journal on book script. And when I joined TR, I did this wrong so many times, and I could not figure out how to get it to work because you have to define all these different variables that aren't mentioned anywhere else. So here is basically the example script. I think it's done very well, commented very well. So first you have to make sure that you set the variables on PC equip and PC skip equip. They are variables that exist in every object basically in every script, but you have to define them to use them. And a lot of sources sometimes skip over that part. So for this book, you have to make sure if you're in menu mode, if you're activating it from the inventory, you're going to be in what's called menu mode. Menu mode is 1 when you're in that menu and 0 otherwise. So if you're in menu mode, you want to set PC skip equip to 1. PC skip equip means if you try to equip it, you do not equip it. You essentially skip the equip. I guess it's worded extremely well for that variable. So once that flag is ticked, the next time the PC will attempt to equip it, it just won't. When it is equipped, you set it to 0 and you activate it. When you activate it, this is where you would put the kind of journal index stuff before the activate. Then it would set the skip equip to 0 and actually allow you to activate. You see a nice little open MW conditional there, and then activate it.
Yeah.
The comments in this script do a lot of the heavy lifting for me here. You want to make sure that you have a return after all this to make sure that it's accessed outside of menu mode because of the interesting differences between OpenMW and the vanilla engine. Another interesting thing with a lot of scripts in general is that there are still differences in script execution between the two engines. So if you're doing something especially esoteric like Marhouse does, try it in both engines to make sure it works, or you're going to have interesting behavior. And last of all, so that handles kind of equipping it from the menu. When you're activating it in world, you want to make sure that you have an on activate script at the very bottom, a journal index right there, followed by an activate. So again, these three, along with many others such as timer scripts, travel scripts, escorts, teleportation, all of these things are handled on the Project Tamriel wiki. So if you are bad at scripting or don't like scripting, go to that website. It's I link it at the end, but it's Project Tamriel wiki scripting examples. Fantastic resource. Really, the whole wiki in general could give this entire talk.
I remember for my showcase, I modified this journal on book script, but instead of journal on book, it was when you drag a skull onto your paper doll, it talks to you. So that was also something where you need to take into account the PC skip equip, but you didn't necessarily need the if on activate. Yeah. It was kind of funny because you also had set position cell and invisible NPC who just force greeting on you. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways you can modify this.
You can technically equip anything. Anything dragged onto your character's paper doll is considered an equip. Kind of an interesting scripting thing. So that's kind of just talking about where to find kinds of questing resources. Now we're getting into the real meat of this, which is interesting techniques that newer scripters don't use that they should, such as debugging. I see a lot of people that use message box scripts, but they forget that you can format them with variables. So for example, if you had a test variable and you wanted to see it in game, you can format the message box with the %, and then the level of precision, and then F followed by the test value, and see it in game. This also works with things like journal indexes. This takes variable arguments. So you could have a journal value in there, an arbitrary journal here, and see the value. If you wanted to make little checkpoints to see where your bug in your script is, you can very easily do things like this instead of just saying print 1, print 2, print 3. You can get realistic feedback from this.
Yeah.
Another thing that I see people either underuse or misuse is the random 100, specifically with things like latest rumors, little secret, lots of different dialogue tips. Random 100 is rolled between, I believe, 1 and 100, or is it 0 and 99? I'm bad at discrete math.
0 and 99, I believe, because
0, yeah.
Yeah, 0 and 99.
0 and 99. So this is a vanilla Blood Moon dialogue block. You can see random 100 is rolled every time that you talk to an NPC, basically. And if it is greater than 80, you're going to get the top response, which turns out to a 20% chance. The middle one is a 10% chance, followed by 10, 10, 10. The bottom one is a 30% chance. Because this is 0 to 100, essentially, if you want one topic to be weighted one way or the other, you can kind of play with these cutoffs and get this distribution. I don't know if this was intentional. This is probably similar to what Danae mentioned with spacing out the journal indexes. They probably made a 30, a 40, a 50, and they didn't know how many they were going to make. So they're like, it's fine. And that approach certainly works too. But if you wanted a response to be rare or less commonly used, you could make it random 100 less than or equal to 90 or greater than or equal to 90, vice versa.
Flynn has an interesting comment.
It is 0. It's 0 to 100 inclusive. Interesting.
Yeah, which is kind of bad.
There you go.
But yeah. Well, what you could do is instead of doing random. See, it's weird because random is also another thing. It's a function that will take in an input and then do 0 to that input minus 1. Yeah, so if you do random 100, it'll be 0 to 100 inclusive. If you do random comma 100, it will be 0 to 99 inclusive. Very oddly.
That's it's kind of just indicative of the kind of weird idiosyncrasies that Morrowind script has. One tool, this is probably my favorite one out of everything in here. This is my favorite little trick that you can do. You can have conditional choices. The results box will run Morrowind script. So in this case, you can set an arbitrary variable, in this case a global, which I put is Mort. In this case, is Mort is 1 because I am. And you can modify the choices that are given to the player. The biggest use that I think of for this is if you have choices that would or wouldn't necessarily be true for the player at certain times. I've seen people that will duplicate the dialogue line and change the variables on the dialogue box itself instead of just doing results box scripting, which will save you an entire line of dialogue there. If you want to adjust what things are given to the player, like if they don't meet a skill check, you can just remove that line from them entirely. If they do meet a skill check, you can give them extra lines. You can race check, class check, anything in there. I think this is a fantastic tool you can give to people. A lot of people, I mean, everyone knows of like start script or giving the player items, removing items. Remember that you can run basically anything in the results box, and I think it's even a little more lenient with what it gives you because it's I think it's compiled at the time that it runs.
It is, yeah. So it'll take some references, like yeah, good.
Oh no.
Or it's like there are some things where if you're doing, this will be relevant to the next slide in particular. Sometimes if you try to refer to a static in, like, let's say in a script, you'll need to make sure, you'll need to tick a special box that tells the engine that static will be around, at the game start. Otherwise, it won't compile. However, that won't be necessary for a dialogue results script. You don't need to take references persist there because that's like script basically doesn't even exist until you open up that response. I think.
Flynn asks, can it be compiled in the CS? The answer is it is not compiled.
Right, you just type it out. You can just make a totally erroneous script and like in a results box, and it won't do anything until you actually open it up. At which point it might crash your game. But
Yeah, so if you want to crash someone's game, that's an easy way to do it.
yeah,
Another thing that is everyone should know of, and use to various degrees, is local variable reference. So whenever you define like a little local variable in an NPC script, you can reference it from other scripts by typing out the NPC or the object's name with a dot and then the variable name.
yes.
Um,
I
null
know someone. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to talk about control Q?
Null says, beware, it runs a script and can mess up your values or dirty things. That's with regards to error check results. Yes, error check results is a dangerous CS function. I believe the recommendation now is if you ever use that function in the CS, exit and don't save, and then reopen it again.
Yeah.
It's like a pre-compiling function built into the CS. With regards to local variable reference, so every TR NPC will have many variables, but two of them are known as control and control Q. One of the pieces of advice given to TR developers, it might not actually be given, is to utilize these local variables instead of making your own bespoke variable for NPC specific functions. For example, let's say you wanted to do a do not a do once, but like a talked to NPC once variable. Instead of making your own variable, just use control or control Q and reference them in this way. One of the main reasons to use these built-in variables is you avoid cluttering the construction set's local variable list. So whenever you're filtering by local variable in dialog, you see every local variable that's ever been made across every ESP that you currently have loaded. Null, this would be a cool thing to fix. Make sure that the dialog filters only filter to the NPC being selected with regards to local variables. That would be cool. Because trying to scroll through a list of like 1,000 local variables defined across every script is kind of annoying. But
Oh, nice.
hell yeah, we got some CSSC changes. Woo!
Yeah. And it's like, this is not quite a problem with globals because you're almost never scrolling through the list of global variables. And if you are, you can probably find better ways to use your time. But you are usually scrolling through the locals every time you're filtering some dialogue to someone, which is a pain.
Yes.
So, until Null makes that fix to CSSC, try to save yourself and your fellow developers some time, and try to use local variable names that have already been used, if you can help it. If you're making some really esoteric and complicated script that someone else is going to have to review, maybe yourself in a month, I may or may not have been in this position. I may or may not be currently in this position. Try to follow actual best practices in the real world, like, descriptive names, clear self-documenting code, that kind of thing. But, if it's just like some random talk to NPC once and then never again kind of thing, just use control Q, use control. Don't waste your time.
Yes. One thing that I believe Texifornian taught me way back in the day was how to group subquests within one topic. This is a godsend if you're making a very complex quest with multiple subtasks. In this example, you have one kind of global quest where someone is giving you multiple tasks, and within that you have different journal IDs in there. The IDs can be anything, but you'll notice they all have the same name. All journals with the same name are grouped together in your journal tab itself. So you can see as someone's going through this quest, they hit the MB tasks 10 at the top. You can see that at the top. They completed both. I didn't even do the quest correctly. But anyway, you get the point here. You get the subtasks from here. that feed into the same journal index, and then you can check off the main journal index itself. Hopefully this makes sense, like why you would use this.
Yeah, I mean, you could complete those tasks in any order. Like, I imagine you could, Aleph, this guy might have given you, like, in the same response, maybe, find spoons, kill the barbarian, right? So
Yeah.
you would, if you're being naive about this, you might just want to make that one straight quest line, like in one journal entry. But here's the thing, right? You're gonna have to assign wooden spoons to some entry, let's say 20, and kill a barbarian to say 30. Then it's like, okay, how do you check for the state where you've killed the barbarian but you haven't collected the spoons, right? If you have that barbarian entry that's at 30, let's say, then there's no way to check that you also have hit the spoons entry, which is 20, unless you split those off into two separate, you know, things, two different like journal subquests, or you use globals or locals. But that's its own sort of can of worms. That's a bit hard to read and keep track of.
I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head with what situation you would do this in. You would use subquests when the player can do more than one thing in any order.
Yeah.
Non-linear.
Non-linear.
Yeah. So if it's like
open world,
if there is a meaningful quest advancement that requires more than you talking to one thing, and you for some reason don't want to use a global, you should use this. I'm sure knowing this, you could think of a dozen different ways to use it. Feel free. It's very fun.
Yeah.
Oh, also make sure that you don't finish the quest via a subquest unless you mean to, because if you finish one of these, it'll be marked as finished until you hit a different journal index, which will drag it back out of the finished category. I'm I'm pretty sure that's the behavior of it, but
yeah, you only want finish to happen in the main trunk of the quest, pretty much, and be tasked in this case.
That's more or less how I use it. Also, yeah, Flynn brings up a good point. It's useful if you don't want to mess up your existing journal conditions. You could also use this to kind of monkey patch your quests and add in like little interstitial sections if you number your questing badly or want to add a little like addendum to the quest, or even if you just want to kind of give the player information in the journal, but it doesn't necessarily pertain to the quest itself. For example, let's say you're finding information for something, but it isn't strictly quest relevant. Rather than advancing the main quest state, just throw all that like extra bonus information into a little subquest and trigger it from there. That's also used pretty commonly.
I think Morrowind, the vanilla game, has an interesting instance of this, where at the how like the sleeper agents of the sixth house awake at various points, and like at the end of the quest, they'll thank you for curing them. There is one new journal like entry for every single sleeper thanking you at the end of the game. So it's like it's subquest. It's part of the whole sleepers awake quest, but like you can be thanked by them in any order. So in order to keep track of all the different states at once, the only way to do it would be to either keep a global running, keep a local running, or use the quest, this like subquest structure. So I'll link the thing there in the chat.
That is that's actually a perfect example of how this is used in vanilla as well.
Yeah.
Bigwatt asks, I've done this before, but for the subquest, I do not give it a quest name. Instead of tasked for Aleph, the first row of my subquest is the one with index 10. Is the quest name box still important for subquests? I would say yes if you want them to be grouped. I don't know what would happen if you didn't give it a quest name. It would just appear in your journal, but not linked to the topic itself.
Yeah, I think so. Which some people would find preferable. I know Flynn is an opponent of letting you group your quests journal entries by name. He says you should just remember what everything belongs to organically. But I think if you wanted to keep that, that structure where you can just look for entries by topic or by quest name, you would want to have definitely keep that quest name identical.
Yes. So those I would say are the main tips that I would give if you were trying to kind of step up your questing game and do some more kind of advanced stuff. We'll get into some even more advanced stuff at the end, with some suggestions that Marhouse and Evil Eye have talked about. But
Yes.
now I just kind of have a battery of different tips that I've learned over the years or that I've heard about. Don't be afraid of global variables. This was a common belief back in the day. I'm talking like 2007-ish, where people would say global variables are terrible. They pollute the Morrowind namespace, and if you have too many, it'll make your scripts or Morrowind slow down. This one guy named Josh or Xeon, who made a mod called Farmer Mod, said, no way that's true, and then made an ESP with 10,000 globals and was like, it does nothing. Like you're essentially, it's just an indexed list. Like, why would that slow down the game? So feel free, if using globals makes your scripting and questing easier, go nuts. Obviously, don't intentionally introduce 10,000, because everyone else will have to look at it if they run your mod and make sub mods. But they are fantastic, and everyone should use global variables more.
Yeah. I remember one time I asked you if I should use the SubQuest structure or use the global variable structure for TR, and you said, maybe you don't believe this anymore. You said that you should use the globals because TR already has way too many quests and it's cluttering up the journal list.
I mean, so, it's not wrong. No one, if you're choosing one to clutter up, clutter the globals, because no one has to read the global list, whereas people commonly have to scroll down or find their quest in the list. I believe technically making another journal index is probably more memory as well. I think globals are
right, because you also have to associate strings
basically
with it.
Free.
Yeah. For the CS students, it's a hash map, the globals. Or I guess it's a linked list traversal.
G7 says globals did used to be a linked list traversal for every access, but MWSE fixed it. Yeah, well, that's good. So it basically used to be as slow as journals. Now it is objectively faster. So that's good.
Nice. Theta M to Theta 1.
Detail Devil says globals are great for cross-mod communication. Agree. Especially for things like TR, if people are making little submods based off of it, just by exposing more information into globals, you kind of assume that they're always there and can always be referenced by these little submods. Oh yeah, checking whether things are installed. That's also fantastic. I think more people should do that as well.
How would that work actually? Like, if you were to do something in like a script where it's like if global equals 1, right, where global is only set to 1 by a mod, doesn't that still suppose the global exists? Like, wouldn't that only not compile? Or is it that your mod and the other mod you're checking for both create that global, but only one of them sets it to 1?
I think they'd probably both set the global, and yeah, you'd have a start script with Flint says it requires a start script which sets it to 1. Yeah, so that's I think we tried or thought about something similar for TR and like data add-on. You would have like these, I think we tried invisible meshes, and one of them was like you wanted to just set a variable from TR data, whether it was installed or not, via start script. Prof Armitage says scripting for dummies says a lot of global scripts can slow down the game. Yes, that is correct. Because scripts are run every single frame, if you are arbitrarily making a ton of global scripts, you will notice slowdown eventually. So the next kind of tip in here is using position cell instead of position. I know some guides say position is great for outdoors and position cell is great for indoors, or both.
Another USP nonsense.
I don't know why you wouldn't just use position cell everywhere. I have gotten very mixed results from the position function, and you can simply provide the external cell ID into position cell and works just the same. I have never had issues with position cell ever, and I have with position. So my recommendation is never use position. Just use position cell. They are functionally identical. And I'm sure Null's going to be like, actually, position cell is terrible. Never use it. So the weird thing about position cell is if you're positioning the player, that rotation function is in degrees. You're going to see the degrees in the construction set. And normally if you're like positioning the player somewhere, you want them to face a particular direction after a teleportation, everything's going to be great. You're going to get the correct rotation. If you're positioning literally anything else, the rotation is in minutes, which is degrees times 360. I don't believe this has been fixed in MWSE, and I think it would probably break a lot of mods that do this otherwise, so I don't know if it would be possible to fix it.
It would break the quest I'm working on, is what I can say. Oh yeah, position cell doesn't take variables, but here's an interesting thing. So there is another function that's called SetPos, which takes in an argument called x, y, or z, and basically then takes a variable which you can use to set the x position or position on the y-axis, z-axis. So position cell cannot take any variable arguments. You need to know exactly where you're placing someone ahead of time if you use it. But let's say you want to do like a sort of non-deterministic placement, or you don't know where you're placing this NPC in this cell, at compile time, but at runtime you do know. What you could do is, as long as you know the cell you're placing them in, you can position cell them into some like dummy coordinates, like 0, 0, 0, or whatever. And then you set pos x, y, z with variable arguments. And then that's basically a way to sort of hack in arguments, variable arguments for this. However, cell ID, well, there's no way to hack in variable cell ID. You'll have to do that, statically. And you can't really do rotation either with a variable to some extent. This is because there's no set rots thing. Or rather, I think there is, but it doesn't really work on actors. So yeah, set angle Z. You could try that, but it doesn't really work on actors. I tried it. So if you wanted to really get baroque with it, what you could do is use face in some sense. Now, face also doesn't take arguments, but it does at least a set angle Z. Does it work on actors? I tried it out on actors, and it didn't work. I had to use face at some point. Maybe I'll have to try it again. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of different ways you can do it.
That is a fantastic hack and kind of indicative of the kind of insane nonsense you'll deal with if you dive into the more esoteric Morrowind scripting world. Really, this whole conversation is kind of the prime example of someone saying, well, this works. Really? Because I tried it and it didn't work. And you're probably both right to a degree.
Yeah, I think it sets the angle mathematically. I think you can try set angle Z 180. Then if you type in get angle, it will say 180 instead of whatever it had before. But it won't actually change the actor's orientation at all, at least visibly. At least this is what I found. So
Schrodinger's rotation.
Schrodinger's rotation. Yeah. Face will work, but it also doesn't take variables either. So, I guess what you could do is you could maybe place an invisible NPC next to them with SetPos as well, in the position you want them to face. I don't know. That seems. And then hope that they look at them. I guess that wouldn't even work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm wasting time here. What's the third bullet point about?
The third point is another one that you brought up. If you're trying to do complex math, technically, if you're trying to do trigonometric functions or trying to calculate some crazy angles with Morrowind scripts.
Oh yeah.
Use intermediate variables. The example here is not nearly as complex as it needs to be before you start to see weird results, but there is definitely an upper limit to the number of nested expressions you can have before Morrowind script just says, no, I'm not doing this. But I don't think it explicitly fails. It kind of silently fails and just gives you the wrong result.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of failure.
So if you start to see weird behavior from your very long expressions, break them out into intermediate variables, and that will probably fix it. I have a decent amount of missed tips here. Another thing that people sometimes forget that I've forgotten many times, make sure if you're using activators, check that box references persist. It will error sometimes and not tell you why, and you'll kind of rack your brain thinking, what am I doing wrong? The object is definitely here. This is what this box is for. If you do not take references persist, you cannot target this object with scripts. For NPCs and the player, they don't have, creatures as well, I believe, always persist. Those will always exist. Activators, misc items, weapons, armor, etc. If you're targeting it via a script, you need the references persist if you want it to run on a specific object. The last kind of tip here is to remember that while loops exist. I think I've seen this used in one context myself, but I think it's a useful little paradigm to remember. If you want, if the player is gathering a certain amount of something, or you're giving the player rewards for however many berries they picked or something, you can do a while get item count greater than a number. So in this case, you would remove everything more than 5, but you don't have to say more than 0. If you want to remove all of an object from someone's inventory, do greater than 0. Remove the item. You could give them something in that, and then end while. You could increment a variable. Just remember that while loops exist because they are fantastically helpful when you can't think of what else to do.
There's this very arcane use of a while loop that I found to basically place NPCs in a cell randomly, or like not randomly, but like if you have a set list of NPCs that you want to place in the cell, but you want to change up the way they're placed, like if I enter the cell at this time, they're gonna be placed in these positions. If I enter another time, they'll be placed in other positions. What I found was basically I would use a while loop to sort of iterate through the whole list of NPCs and just sort of keep placing them at different spots. And it is helpful, I guess, because these are scripts, right? So they're going to be running once a frame. So what you could do is you could just have, you could just have it run, let's say 10 NPCs. You could just let the script run for 10 frames, and then, for each frame you place a new NPC. But if you just want to make it snappy, ideally, you would just use a while loop and iterate through all 10 NPCs at once in the single frame. That's what I found, at least. That's an more esoteric way of doing it. It's been so long since I implemented it that I couldn't even tell you exactly what the role was. But I guess you might see the results of it today if we have enough time.
Esoteric tips are what this is all about at this point.
Thank you, Mort. Thank you.
So now we're kind of moving into the kind of quest design, quest balance territory here. It's important to know how NPCs work, specifically with combat specifically. So if you give an NPC a weapon, their weapon skills function normally. They don't swing weapons the same way the player does. All of their weapons have the exact same speed, and the min and max damage are going to be just a random value between 0 and max damage. Well, 0 being min damage to max damage. So whereas the player will do more damage based on how long they hold the button and how long the animation works, with NPCs, they're basically attacking at a set speed and just picking a number in that value. That means that NPCs with nominally slow weapons like axes do a lot more damage than they probably should sometimes. If they hit the max damage multiple times in a row, you're probably dead if you're level 1. NPCs
Is this really?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's this really annoying encounter on the way from Pelagia to Belmore. It's very easily missable. Godrod Harrybreeks, he's just like this level 14 Nord Barbarian, where most players are like level 3. And he has this belt that damages your stamina, and has this giant axe that just I found 2 or 3 shot me when I was playing like a thief. So now Mort has educated me on why exactly that was the case. I thought he was just really strong. It turns out he just has a really dumb weapon.
I mean, he's level
That'd be
14.
Yeah, that's also true. But oh, I see we have one God Rod recognizer in the chat.
uh,
yeah.
the hardest thing I think when you're making NPCs and trying to like make meaningful encounters is trying to predict NPC spell AI. I have read so many different things, both in the OpenMW research wiki and kind of more anecdotal evidence of how NPCs select spells. It's a combination of basically everything, where the NPC is going to take the mana cost of the spell, the actual spell power, so the unadjusted mana cost into account, and their own skills when determining what to cast. There's also some spells that they just don't cast, and I think both OpenMW and the Morrowind code patch slightly change how the NPCs use spells. So the Morrowind code patch has a function to make them cast powers, zero cost powers, which they normally wouldn't do because they normally prefer to use higher mana cost spells. With the thought being that higher mana spells must be more powerful. They also don't really pay attention to what kinds of spells they're casting. They just kind of know that higher mana good, higher power good, cast higher mana spells. So if you give them like a high level resist disease, they could very well just spam that the entire fight, and the player just hits them with a battle axe until they're dead, and they have done nothing. You should always look at the spells of mages. If you want to make an interesting encounter, you should always curate the spells of mages, and even more importantly, test them in game. Make spells or give spells to an NPC. Go into the game and fight them. They might cast something crazy. You might have forgotten to give them good magic spells, and they'll melee you the entire time. But please test your encounters, and that goes for melee encounters as well. You want to make sure that you're giving the appropriate amount of challenge to the player at that specific point in time. NPCs also really hate to use self-healing spells, but they will use potions. So you'll see a lot of, I think it's the Royal Guards and Tribunal have exclusive restore health. I think the hands do as well. Maybe even ordinators do. There's a lot of NPCs with restore health potions because they love chugging them, especially when they get low on health. Oh baby, they're going to go back to full pretty quick. If you are feeling particularly cheaty, or if they're like a creature, you can just give them a passive healing ability. There are a lot of mods that do that, and you probably wouldn't notice because some of them are pretty subtle. I do it in Where the Sixth House a lot for ash vampires because they are close to the heart. Anything else on this topic? I think how NPCs work.
Yeah. Well,
Ravane has some tips. Autocalc will reliably give NPCs a jump spell whenever it can. Yes. Whenever you recalculate stats on an NPC, it's going to give them all the default spells for that class. Well, based on their magic skills, not their class. Anytime you hit, I think AutoCalc is decent at providing an okay stat block for that level. The spells are all over the place. Danae raises an interesting point. NPCs not equipping armor. You should always curate the skills of your NPCs as well. If they are given a full set of bone mold armor and you do not give them medium armor, they might not equip it. Especially if they have a higher unarmored spell, the NPCs will equip what is mathematically the best for them, and so you might have a bunch of unarmored Nord barbarians running around on accident.
Right. You might give someone a Colovian for a helm if you want them to look goofy, but they don't have enough light armor, so if they want to equip it.
Yep. That's
yeah.
good. Ravane, that is exactly what I do as well. You hit AutoCalc once, then immediately uncheck it, and then you can mess with all their stats and stuff and finally tune it. I think I go into this later, specifically what kinds of little tweaks I make. Talking about creatures. Creatures are especially weird. They don't have skills like unarmored and acrobatics. They have combat, magic, and stealth. Combat is the same as all weapon skills. Magic is the same as all magic skills. Stealth is marksman. Stealth is marksman and only marksman. That is the only thing it's used for. So if they don't
So
have
bad.
range, just don't bother setting it because it does not matter. They're not going to like sneak attack you. It doesn't really do anything. So creature attacks are
Haven't you ever heard of place at PC?
yeah. Yeah, place a PC right behind you. Classic questing technique. Creature sneak. They kind of don't.
Yeah, do they have sneak? Like, is that even a thing? It's a new.
No. As far as I know, they don't. I don't think most of them even have animations for it.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is like Fargoth sneaking around and like crouching.
Well, he's an NPC.
Yeah, he's an NPC. He's not even a creature.
Yeah. So creatures also have these attacks. The attacks are randomly chosen. I believe it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 between 1, 2, and 3. So if you want to mess with the range and have one attack be randomly very powerful and one attack being a little weaker range, you can do that. Most vanilla NPCs have a static range for all 3 attacks. That's perfectly fine too. It's important to know that creatures get the strength bonus from their attacks as well. And if you remember the formula for damage, I believe 50% is 0 bonus, and 100 strength is, it's either like 0.5 plus 1.5 or plus 1.25. There's a formula for it. More strength is better for physical attacks, obviously.
Always.
So they do get strength bonuses. They do get obviously speed and luck and agility bonuses and all that. The weird thing is if the creature has a weapon, they get this attack damage added on to the weapon that they already do. So if you're fighting a Dremora or a Golden Saint with like a Daedric Axe, that is, I think, mathematically the worst encounter for the player they could ever fight. Because they're not only taking the full range of Daedric Axe damage faster than a Daedric Axe, they're getting this attack damage tacked onto it as well, which is very funny. And if you hate the player, this is a great way to just arbitrarily burst them with an insane amount of damage.
I'll make a note of that for the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, right now I have a Golden Saint in the tournament who's not doing enough damage with her spear, so I might upgrade that to an axe.
So this is the kind of unofficial TRPT level range that I made a long time ago when thinking about game balance.
Oh, wow, you made this? I've seen this around a lot, but I thought it was really well done. I had no idea who was the genius behind it.
Oh, wow, thank you. Extra credit for you, sir. So this is based on the technique that Ravane mentioned, where you auto calculate the stats and then uncheck it and kind of mess with the variables. Obviously, creatures don't really have auto calculate, so for that it's a little more difficult to balance. But for the most part, I like that this level range kind of hits every part that you would expect throughout Morrowind. I think the one I think that maybe higher level enemies should be a little more common than this list says. This kind of assumes that the player is going through the game reasonably slowly and isn't using a bunch of trainers and playing like a normal human being. But most people get to like level 20 in a few hours now and then are like, hey, where's all the hard encounters? There's nothing but like mid-game stuff over here.
Where's all the fun?
I would recommend maybe shifting this up by like 5 levels to be fair. if you're being pragmatic about balancing, I guess. So this is also on the PT Wiki. The NPC questing scripting guidelines go over a lot of the do's and don'ts when it comes to questing. Things like don't write player thoughts in journal entries. Things that you kind of know if you play a lot of Morrowind and read a lot of the quests, but when you're making a quest, sometimes you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. The PT Wiki has a ton of fantastic resources like this um, available at your disposal. So, common question is how do I make a memorable encounter? Uh, there's more to this than simply just making a very tough Daedroth for a player to fight with a bunch of terrible spells. I think if you add multiple NPCs or creatures, like if you set up a row of like skeleton archers and then have them fight like melee skeletons, that's a more intrinsically interesting encounter than simply fighting one bigger skeleton. As
Yeah.
cool as that would be, actually. Um,
I always feel like the ideal dungeon just had every enemy in one room.
yeah. I know I had one NPC'd one dungeon for like DoD, and rather than having them fight like a giant Dwemer enemy, I just had them fight like 20 Dwemer spiders. I'm like, ah, you'll figure it out.
Oh, that's fun.
Just a
That's
big
fun.
old room with a bunch of spiders coming at you. Um, I think it's memorable to me. Remember to always adjust mage spells manually. Feel free to make up your own spells and adjust the costs. You will have to test them in game. Um, Mages will sometimes not cast spells that you want them to. My suggestion, remove 99% of spells. You can have an NPC with 2 spells, give them the same adjusted mana cost and the same power, and they will cast them roughly 50-50, assuming that both of the like all their spell schools are equal. So that's kind of a cheat here, is if you set all of their like spell schools to like 90, make all of your spells have an equal adjusted power and mana cost, um, they'll cast them roughly equally. I know for Beware of the Sixth House, I want to say most NPCs have like one spell, um, because Morrowind combat. I mean, it's not Baldur's Gate. You're not
Yeah.
things don't have like multiple turns. Encounters are usually over in like less than a minute, usually less than 30 seconds, oftentimes in a single blow. So keep it short and memorable, and make these encounters actually challenging instead of absolute pushovers like they are when you use autocalc.
Right. It's
Um,
like you also, in terms of getting rid of most of those spells, it's kind of like think about how few of the spells you use when you're playing the game, right? Like you probably have this whole list of spells that NPCs are giving you at earlier levels. You probably just use like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 maybe. You want to prevent the AI isn't as smart as you though, so you want to sort of get rid of the decision paralysis for the AI. Is how I think about it. Just give them the cream of the crop. Just give them the best spells to throw at the player, because they're going to be giving the player all they've got, ideally. Because
yep,
if they don't, they're just going to die and then never use any of their spells ever again. So the way,
agreed.
that, yeah, the way that you design an NPC's spell inventory should be a bit different than how you design a player's spell inventory, but pretty much the same concept. Just make them strong, make them powerful. Don't use autocalc.
Yep.
Keep it
For
simple.
for uh for melee encounters, I will admit I usually cheat most of the time with NPCs, even kind of lower level encounters. I will set whatever weapon they're using a little bit higher. Not usually into the 80s or the 90s like it says on the slide, but for like a lower level encounter, I think that more often than not, players will be higher level than you expect, especially with mods like TR or faction mods. add-ons, whatever, like Rise of Hell Sylvani, it's generally assumed that players doing non-vanilla Morrowind content will be 10, 15, 20. Feel free to set weapon skill higher for these hostile NPCs. Because if they're default, like if they're actually like a level 3 NPC and you auto-calc their stats, they're going to get the true vanilla Morrowind experience, and they're just going to whiff on the player constantly if the player isn't also level 1. And that can be good and bad. I kind of opt to providing more challenge to the player than normal. So I always set their weapon skill a little bit higher. Armor skill as well. That's kind of the other half of the same coin. If you want NPCs to not just be cleaved in two in a single blow, give them a little more weapon skill. You can also give NPCs passive abilities like regenerating health or built-in sanctuary and resistances. I do this to make kind of pseudo boss encounters in Beware the Sixth House for the Ash Vampires to make each of them feel more unique. I gave each of them like a set of different resistances. So one of them is like completely immune to frost damage. Another one
Oh
is
wow.
completely immune to like lightning damage. So that if the player were some smug Dunmer mage being like, I got my fire spell, I'm gonna beat everything with no challenge. Well, guess what? One of them is immune to fire as well. I even made one of them. I think I gave it like Sanctuary 90. So it's like, oh, you think that you're just gonna be a cool barbarian that doesn't do any magic damage? No, can do. Um, so some people think that passive abilities on like NPCs is maybe a step too far. But I think mods like MDMD or More Dangerous Morrowind Denizens, they use NPC abilities and it feels fantastic. I think that in addition to my rebalance mods, if you wanted a rebalance mod for the mainland itself, non Sixth House, More Dangerous Morrowind Denizens is kind of like the gold standard for how to do that. And they go even further than I ever did with my rebalance mods. They fully curate the spell list for like dozens and dozens and dozens of NPCs. They give them unique weapons and abilities and curate all their skills and spell lists. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it.
I would advise, as far as adjusted weapon armor skills, I would like to add on, this is a bit late. If you're giving your NPC an enchanted sort of thing, which I'd recommend, I would highly recommend setting their enchant skill to be pretty high, like maybe even 100 if they're not a trainer. Just because it's not very fun for this NPC whom you've given an enchanted item to just stop being able to use that enchanted item because they ran out of charge after 3 hits. So I say if you want to let them keep using their enchantment for the duration of the encounter, give them a high enchant. That's what I did for my tournament. This is a TR quest. This is the esoteric thing that Mort was talking about. I have a bunch of NPCs who aren't really mages or anything, but they use enchanted equipment, and I just gave them really high enchant, just so that it's more fun to watch them fight, more fun to fight them. Yeah.
Acute
And
Wangle asks. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
no, yeah. I was gonna. The and was a transition into acute wangle. Yeah, no. What is you read it? You have a better voice than I do.
That's well, thank you. Not
You're
true.
welcome.
If a mage NPC has a weapon, how do they decide what to use between spells and melee? That is an excellent question. It has to do with both their remaining mana, and I think it does like a value calculation of spells and then player distance and weapon and tries to see what it should use, and then rolls an internal D100 and just picks something at random.
Yeah.
Um,
I've seen NPCs not be able to decide between using magic or melee, and then like by the time they decide, you've already started stun locking them with melee, and they just die. They might have some really powerful spells, or maybe a very powerful melee weapon, maybe both, but they can't really decide which one to use, and they end up just dying for it.
I suppose that's also important to make sure your mages have like low hand-to-hand skill. or give them a weapon, because the last thing you want is for your mage to like run out of mana or accidentally have full mana and be like, you know what, I'm gonna punch the player to death even though I have like 40 hand to hand. Really, this goes back to test your mage encounters in game, because the AI is absolutely wild, and it is different between OpenMW and vanilla. Um, you probably have a pretty good idea of what it would be like on OpenMW, simply because their functions are available and uh, compiled by hand, and we have the source. You'll have to ask Null what the hell NPCs are selecting with the vanilla engine. I have no idea. I wish that someone were to do the research and definitively say what the AI is doing. That would be a fantastic project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not it, by the way. So, so as far as rewarding the player, make sure the reward fits the challenge. I think that some people like to go way far in either direction, where they'll make like a super hard quest, then be like, "Here's your amulet of water walking, my lord." It's like, come on, get out of here. Don't be afraid to reward the player. Loot's fun. Everyone loves loot. Everyone loves artifacts. Um, at the same time, don't get so full of yourself that you think that you're like low level Daedra Dramora encounter is worth like a Daedric battle axe or something. I think the best example of this is like the Amulet of Shadows quest from Vanilla Morrowind. You like kill a single guy and then you get the most broken artifact in the game. That might be just them misunderstanding how good Chameleon is.
Yeah.
But
It basically makes the entire Thieves Guild quest line, for instance, like trivial, Morag tone,
yeah,
everything.
that might just be Chameleon being too good. But make sure that you aren't just completely overwriting all of Vanilla Morrowind's items with like the best axe that's ever been created in existence. I like to make items that have like that fill particular niches, or that have strong advantages and strong downsides to compensate. If you can't make it powerful, make it thematic. So this one, I believe, is from a quest where you have to like pearl dive or something. Um, I don't remember the context for this quest, but a
It's on
common
some
thing is,
river or something.
yeah, it's like
Yeah. There's a
the
body of water
context is
involved.
like, oh, you have to like rescue an NPC from like a grotto, and then they give you this as like a reward, or you do some Imperial Legion quests and you get like some Templar enchanted Templar armor. Um, Having the rewards match the quests in terms of flavor is always more fun than just getting some randomly generated Skyrim sword that someone made. If it can't be thematic or powerful, just make it memorable. Um, this is an example item that I added to a TR Dominions of Dust enemy. It is a steel sword with Fortify Longblade 50 to 50. So you effectively have this sword that never misses, but it's just not very good. I think that is, it's such a weird stat block to see. I think that creating novel like enchantments or novel like weird stats on items that no one has ever messed with is a lot of fun. So try it, see what happens. Like make a swift swim like 200 for 3 seconds. So the player just like flies in one direction for swimming. That would be a cool item. You should make that, because that doesn't necessarily break the game, but it is memorable. People would certainly be like, "Oh hey, remember that weird like built of Swift Swim 5,000?" I think I added one. I added some spear that was like disintegrate armor 500 for 1 second. It's like, why not? Just do it, it's a game. Just make it
Yeah.
wild stuff going on.
It is
And if you
often said that enchanting is more fun in the CS than in the actual game, because in the construction set you can get these like strong enchantments that are counterbalanced by weak or weaknesses or like downsides or disadvantages. You can have like the really nice fortified skill long blade on the shitty steel sword, but that's the kind of thing that isn't really recognized by in game, right? I mean, in the CS, there's no limits on what enchantments you can place, which lets you do these creative things. But in game, every enchantment is just a linear addition to the cost. It doesn't really register the weaknesses or the downsides or anything like that.
Yep. And if you can't think of a reward and you're not like, if it's a low level quest and you can't think of something, don't just give someone another amulet of like Almsivy intervention. I think that is like a very lazy quest reward. Just give the player gold at that point. There's nothing wrong with gold. I think of it as like a gift card, but for Morrowind. It's like, I don't know what to give you, but you can go get some training in short blade or whatever you want. I think that's a admirable quest reward. So this is surprisingly the end of the talk. I just link a bunch of resources here. I linked Project Tamriel wiki a bunch of times. Morrowindmodders.com is a site run by that guy I mentioned, Josh or Xeon, that made Farmer Mod from 15 years ago, where he talks about a lot of the like interesting script quirks, and he had an entire page about what the scripting for dummies got wrong, which I thought was fascinating. I will post the links in the chat as well. Another site that I like is this actually sharing my monitor? I could probably just open it up, really.
I only see your slide.
Yeah. So is it like this? Yeah. So this is Morrowind Modders. Has a lot of like, it reads like a blog of a guy who's very sick of Morrowind scripts, and I think that it's a very funny read to see a lot of his like suggestions and insight from back in the day. Another link that I like is this very silly, very old, and usually wrong Morrowind script commands page. I know for a fact I'm not the only person that uses this. A lot of them are just wrong as far as what they're suggesting.
The last UESP link, or
yeah. But I think that it's fascinating because it gives you like it gives you code snippets. It tells you like generally how to use it as far as nomenclature.
Oh, we still just see your slide, by the way.
Oh, really? Dang it.
Yeah.
What?
Well, that's security, man.
Oh, well, it's linked in the
Yeah, I posted
it's linked in the channel.
Yeah.
The link about what Morrowind scripting got wrong is the morrowindmodders.com/scripting notes.
.html.
That is, it might be outdated by this point, but I think that it's if you're really into like Morrowind scripting and questing, it's fascinating, like very esoteric insights that he has with making a massive scripted mod. I wish that we got a improved version of this UESP Morrowind construction kit commands. At the top of the page, it says this page has been moved to the new UESP wiki. Where I want this site, but for like updated information. We need to make this.
I remember at some point someone wanted to make an MSFD 3.0, like LaTeX and everything, make it really nice and like updated. But oh yeah, that is really useful. The one that Null just posted. It's quite helpful for control anything. It doesn't have all the information like on the page itself, but I still use it pretty frequently.
Yeah, I guess that's good, but format is pretty nice because I can just Control F on this page and just immediately see little code snippets or where other examples are used.
Oh yeah, that's really nice.
Well, I'll still use this until I die. The old 2005 UESP page. So are there any other weird scripting techniques that you can think of, Marhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay, well, here's something. If you're coming at this from more of a coding background, you might be familiar with the concept of functions. Functions being these sort of machines that take in inputs, which might be variable, and sort of do different things depending on the different inputs. Now, Morrowind does not have functions. It has scripts that do not take inputs per se. So on the face of things, you can't really have different inputs doing making different things happen. But what I sort of did for the tournament, which is this TR quest, that's very esoteric. This was Evil Eye's advice. He said to use global variables as a proxy for function arguments, which is to say, basically, a big part of this is a thing where I have dueler A fight dueler B in a big duel, in a brawl and tournament. But I don't necessarily know who dueler A and dueler B are going to be ahead of time. Now, what I could do, since there's 8 different, duelers in the roster, I could make 8 different bespoke scripts, start script, start combat on dueler 1, start script dueler 2, dueler 3, and so on. But what I did instead was I had a global for that stored dueler A, like some sort of ID for dueler A, another global for dueler B. Then I just have this sort of a bit convoluted, but it works. This sort of if dueler A equals 1, then dueler B starts combat on dueler 1. If dueler A equals 2, then start combat on dueler 2, and so on. And this sort of hacky workaround let me save a bunch of space, a bunch of memory, a bunch of time. And it's much more debuggable. So I don't think we have time for a demonstration, but it is a pretty fun sort of thing. So for a fun sort of example of what you can do with Morrowind scripting with just what's in the the engine.
There could be an entire third talk on scripting, which is just like weird things going on that you can do. Like it should be run by G7, of course, just bringing up the weird stuff. Yeah, he mentions you can use local vars on a script instead of globals.
This
yes,
is correct. Absolutely.
absolutely. That even saves some namespace.
Indeed. Well, it saves global namespace, dialogue namespace. Dialogue local namespace, though.
Is there a way to measure how far you can go in terms of performance cost of X number of scripts running in the same cell? It's going to depend on what kinds of scripts they are and how good your computer is. A lot of stuff. The name of the game here is just minimization. You always want to think of optimization whenever you're making scripts. So you always want to do like early returns. You always want to like minimize the total number of scripts running. Minimize like the number of NPCs in a cell if you can. Yes, Null mentions beware long or nested if statements. Absolutely.
Very true.
It is better that you have a bunch of early returns and your script looks like relative garbage. Instead of having this like nested tower of power with like if journal index 1 greater than 10, if journal index 10 greater than 20, if journal index 10 greater than 30, it's like no. You need to split it into separate blocks, do early returns, and just make sure this thing isn't running like 1,000 checks.
Yeah. I also find that I think it's better to have a bunch of tiny scripts that do. Okay, this is maybe a bit more esoteric. A bunch of tiny scripts that like have their own little dedicated purposes than like one mega script that does a lot of different things. It seems easier to read and debug to have like the sort of more tiny scripts doing the same thing, doing different things. I don't know if you have contradictory advice there.
I think with all this being said, the performance impact of having an additional NPC, just simply placing another NPC in a cell, is like an order of magnitude worse for performance than like 100 scripts. So
yeah,
I would avoid having weird hacky solutions where you have like invisible NPCs used to trigger stuff or something. That used to be very much a thing back in the day. Is invisible NPCs that like position cell next to the player every frame, and that gives me nightmares.
Every frame? What the heck?
I would know because I did it.
What
it
for?
was bad. I think to have like to track the player through something. It was different times back in the day.
Like a place at PC, then you like find out what cell they're in or something like that, like get
Yeah.
distance or
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that. I mean, I guess it's not great, but yeah, I guess I can see the concept.
There are a ton of ways to shoot yourself in the foot with Morrowind scripts. There are people that do love to do Morrowind script because it's so limited and weird.
It is trying complete, right?
Feel free to ask people and be sure to provide a lot of detail on what it is you're actually trying to do. And they might actually be able to give you a way to do it slightly better. There is no correct way to do it, but there are more optimal ways, we'll say.
Very nice.
Yeah, if anyone has any more Morrowind script questing tips, tricks, etc., feel free to share them in the next few seconds, I guess.
Few seconds.
Otherwise,
oh yeah. If you want to reset an NPC's health and inventory, clean slate, make them fresh, ready for battle. Say you script some sort of battle that like non-lethal battle, and you want them to be at full health again, but you also full magic health, full fatigue, full durability on their items. What you can do is you can do mod health minus 1,000 or 10,000, then resurrect in the same frame immediately right after that. If you do that, then they will basically be brand new, be fresh, and it won't even increment their dead counter. It'll be, like they're as good as new. Like you just place them in there for the first time.
Does it trigger on death? Probably not, right? Because it didn't exit the frame. Does it reset their local variables?
Good question. It might.
Yeah, well,
I haven't tested that yet. You can use A equals 5 times get seconds passed to do stuff like restore 5 health per second continuously instead of using timers and menu mode checks. But you can have like a float A, like set A to 5 times get seconds passed, then like mod current health A. If you want to like script in a constant restoring health of 5 health per second, because the way the get seconds passed works is it's not just going to be like it's just like it returns like floats, right? Like how many frames times how many frames per second, that kind of thing. Yeah. I will say that I've been on the resurrect point. I have been targeting someone in the console. Then whenever you resurrect them, I'm no longer targeting them. So I would assume it resurrected. I reset everything, including local scripts, local variables. I'm not sure. But what's interesting is that it's still the same instance, I think. Like, you know how if you highlight someone in the console, it'll have the ID, then followed by a bunch of numbers that indicates which thing they are, which reference they are.
It's a reference versus object.
Right, yeah. Like, you'll click on someone and be like, Fargoth 00000. So what I'll do is I'll mod health minus 1,000 and resurrect. Then I'm no longer highlighting Fargoth after that. But if I click on him, he's still 000. He hasn't incremented to 001 yet. It's still the same like instance. So maybe the local variables are preserved. I'm not entirely sure.
I would bet it's nuked.
Probably
I would expect it to just completely reset, but it's still a good trick if you want to like.
If you don't care about that. If you didn't set control Q on them.
Yeah.
With a callback.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending my weird scripting and questing talk. I appreciate everyone coming out and listening to me ramble. And I also appreciate everyone chiming in with more tips and tricks, calling me out on where I'm wrong, and suggesting additional things I didn't think about. Thank you again, Danae, for hosting this. It's been a fantastic month, and I've loved kind of seeing the different projects that have come out of this. And I hope that this encourages people that are questing or trying to become better questers to maybe think about things in a better way or get inspired. Thank you again. Thank you again, Marhouse, for joining me on fairly late notice on this talk and contributing as well. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun. Yeah. Maybe there'll be a part 2. I won't be invited to that one. Y'all have found a better guest.
No, come on. Okay. So I guess I'll either hand it over to Danae or silently leave the stage and say thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.